上当百年，欺世大观。
Hello everyone, welcome to Deception of the World. In our last episode, we talked about the 4 freedoms for human beings, namely freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from poverty, and freedom from fear. This episode is part 2 of the story. Now before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks. Now back to the topic. Let's look at it specifically. First, let's talk about freedom of speech. At the end of the Qing dynasty, under the rule of the northern warlords and the nationalist government, the people had always enjoyed considerable freedom of speech, such as the freedom to run a newspaper, which was not uncommon. In the 1870s, Chinese newspaper of modern significance had already appeared. The Current Affairs newspaper, which was organized by Liang Qichao and others, are founded in 1896 to promote the reform thought, became the largest selling newspaper at that time. After the fall of the Qing dynasty, China entered the reign of the northern warlords. In fact, no matter how domineering these warlords were, they still wanted the parliament, except during Yuan Shikai's short period of reign as emperor, and they did not interfere too much with freedom of speech, freedom of thought, or school autonomy, and they respected intellectuals. The intellectuals and social groups at that time were not afraid to express their independent views on the political life of the country. It was the participation of public opinion in politics and its monitoring of those in power that made the warlords fearful, not only of public opinion, but also of the legal process. Duan Qirui, for example, advocated freedom of the press when he was appointed premier, and when he was later heavily criticized by public opinion. Instead of suppressing it, he chose to step down. Even Yuan Shikai, who was claimed to be emperor in a short period of time, treated Zhang Taiyan, Yuan's master of Chinese studies, who denigrated him in every way but was only under house arrest, and he also paid $500 silver a month to support Mr. Zhang. Living in the communist state that bans on speech today, you cannot imagine the ruler's tolerance to the people back then. The freedom of expression during the reign of northern warlords was also reflected in the free publication of newspapers and magazines. In 1920, there were more than 1,000 newspapers and magazines nationwide, and it was said that a new publication came out every 2 or 3 days. It is very interesting to note that journalists at that time were very critical of the government and dignitaries, and they were very vocal. Of course, if they went too far, the northern warlord government will order the closure of the newspaper, but when they open another one, the government will have to turn a blind eye. This is a normal ecology of the government and the public. This is the property of the media. What's the purpose of it if it does not dare to speak, right? There were really no Communist Party's media at that time. In addition, the government only set up a press censor to control public opinion, and if something was found to be going too far, it only told the newspaper to leave a blank page. At that time, there were very few journalists who were in prison or killed. There was one exception: the sensational case of Shao Piaoping, a journalist who was killed. The reason was that he was caught and executed by the ruling marshal Zhang Zhuolin because of his collusion between the CCP. In the bulletin posted after the execution of Shao Piaoping by the General Law Enforcement Division of the Beijing government, the following charge was announced: Shao Zhengqing, the president of the Beijing News, colluded with the Red Russian and propagated communist ideology. The crime is so vicious that it is unforgivable, that he is to be executed by firing squad to show the warning. Shao Piaoping was later revealed to be a secret member of the Communist Party, and Mao attended his certification class when he was a temporary worker at Peking University, listened to half a year of classes, respectfully called him Mr. Shao. During that period, it was not uncommon for people to have rallies and protests. The northern warlord government mostly focused on pacification, and even if students were arrested at that time, they will be released soon. When it was fierce, there were cases of shooting to disperse students, but it was never as massive as the CCP's crackdown, which created bloody events that shocked the world, such as the June 4th incident. Then again, there was a period under the nationalist government from 1925 to 1948. In this period, it followed the tradition of the northern warlords' government respect for intellectuals and maintained respect for the personality, knowledge, and the beliefs of people in this class, while treating them quite well. Before the outbreak of the war in 1937, university professors were paid between $400 and $600 silver per month. $260 to $400 silver dollars for associate professors, $200 to $260 silver dollars for lecturers, and $100 to $180 silver dollars for teaching assistants, $160 to $200 silver dollars for urban high school teachers, and $22 to $55 silver dollars for elementary school teachers. What is this concept? At that time, the librarian at Peking University was paid $8 silver dollars a month. Workers got $10 to $40, and police officers got $4. You heard it right, $4 silver dollars. I think the police might not have been a popular job at that time. People were in high moral integrity, and public security was also good. It didn't need many cops to kill and suppress. At that time, the monthly rent of a courtyard in Beijing was $20, and a family of 4 could maintain a fairly good living with $60 per month, and $100 in Shanghai, and the standard was even lower in small and medium-sized cities. In 1932, there was no more than 200 private cars registered in Beiping, of which the number of cars owned by university professors accounted for 1/5. At that time, professors were free to move around, and there were no communist constraints of establishment, archives, organizational ties, and so on, let alone the ridiculous introduction of household registration invented by Soviet Russia. The state of freedom was a prerequisite for intellectuals to express their individuality, in addition to the freedom to run and publish newspapers. Demonstrations and marches were also quite free. Living in the present, you all wonder why the CCP can run newspapers and publish books in the Kuomintang ruled areas, preach communist ideas, slander the Kuomintang, and organize student protests against the government. And although the nationalist government interfered from time to time, it did not prohibit it. For film production, although the government also has a censorship system, but more concerned about language purification, restrictions on foul language, and so on. I guess today's CCP supporters cursing in the streets at that time might also get caught, but the national government will encourage you to civilize expression of opinion, just like the current Taiwan. During the Second Sino-Japanese War period, the people in the southwest region controlled by the nationalist government had most freedom of thought, speech, and publication, and a rich, colorful culture. At that time, all kinds of scholarship not only did not regress, but also made great progress. According to historical records, there were 141 national folk academic societies in Chongqing alone. At the end of the Qing dynasty, during the reign of the northern warlords and the nationalist government, the Chinese people who enjoyed freedom of speech lived in harmony with each other based on their beliefs in Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Catholicism. With such a free space, people naturally also enjoy freedom from totalitarian fears. Some people may think of the communist propaganda of the old society and together with the fact that the Chinese people were poor at that time, and then question whether the Chinese people enjoy freedom from poverty during the above period. Everything can only be seen in the context of the history of the time, right? It is an indisputable fact that over 20 years of war led to social unrest and suffering of the people. Throughout history, any country that has suffered from internal or external wars has affected the lives and economies of its citizens. As we all know, apart from the Japanese invasion, the biggest civil unrest in China was caused by the CCP's murder and arson to seize power. But the CCP seized every opportunity to take the blame, blaming the nationalist government and creating an evil old society. Do you know how people lived in Beijing between 1927 and 1937? At that time, $1 could buy 30 caddies of rice and 8 caddies of pork. Professors and intellectuals with a monthly salary of hundreds of dollars don't even need to be mentioned, and workers were also comfortable, earning $4 a month to have adequate food and clothing. Drinking and eating meat were not a problem. Let's take a look at the new society that the CCP has been promoting since its establishment. Time and again, political campaigns have stifled freedom of speech and belief. The intellectual class, which passes on the traditional Chinese culture, has been persecuted and even killed. The CCP does this to make you somehow fearful, afraid of it, afraid to criticize it and resist it. Otherwise, you will be worse off than dead until you disappear from Earth. I just want to ask one question. At present, there are more than 2,000 newspapers, nearly 10,000 periodicals, and more than 1,000 radios and television stations on mainland China. Is there a privately run one? Which one dares not to be with the party and challenge the party leader? Not to mention what to take to the streets to demonstrate. How can this be compared to the old society it discredited? If you look at the 2020 happiness ranking of 156 countries in the world, the communist China fell from 86 to 93 in the previous year. I don't need to say anything, and the Republic of China, Taiwan is in 25th place. How's that for a slap in the face? Not who has a problem with the Communist Party. It doesn't even have one of the 4 freedoms. But saying nonsense like only the Communist Party can save China, and also blustering for the red flag to be planted all over the world. The CCP's daydreaming disease is really getting worse. The story is finished. By comparing the so-called old and new societies, you all know the fact that the evil CCP is the root cause of the chaos in China. The evil old society it labeled is a normal society, speaking that the CCP's happy new society it created a famine in which tens of millions of people died of hunger. Even today, those who do not have enough food and clothing have not disappeared, and more people are worried about their livelihoods, buying a house, going to the doctor, going to school, and retirement. In fact, the deeper reason for all this is the CCP's suppression of believers, which has caused a rapid decline in morality in Chinese society and made it difficult to solve the social chaos. Everyone is an imaginary enemy of the CCP, and no one can guarantee that one day they will be hit by the dictatorship, including its supporters and 50 Cent Party, which is tragic. The 4 freedoms that the people had in the past have long been reduced to 4 confinements. What is new about such a regime? It is only appropriate to put oppression, darkness, exploitation, ugliness, ignorance, disaster, terror, and injustice on its head, right? No wonder our people in the new society are infinitely yearning for the old society. Everyone, the CCP is the root cause of all pseudo-happiness and real sufferings, which is already the consensus of the wise people in China, including all of you in our channel. Now before the show ends, please don't forget to subscribe and like, and we'll see you next time on Deception of the World.